Taco Bell's story begins, of course, with Glen Bell and a hot dog stand called Bell's Drive-In, which he opened in San Bernardino, California in 1946. Glen Bell, then 23, left the Marine Corps in 1946. When he returned home, he, like many of his comrades, was looking forward to post-war activities and settling into a career. Fortunately for him, the fast food industry was thriving, and Bell had an idea: a hot dog stand. It was called Bell's Drive-In, and it was located in San Bernardino, California, an agricultural town. Bell had no idea how to run a hot dog stand, but that didn't matter because he learned as he went. When Bell sold his first stand in 1952, he was able to build a larger, better stand that sold both hot dogs and hamburgers. Bell wasn't exactly thinking outside the bun at this point. He did manage to open his second stand before the McDonald's brothers announced their San Bernardino fast food venture. You can probably guess how it ended, given that McDonald's is still selling burgers and Bell's business is no longer in operation. Bell began to investigate alternative menu options as a result of increased competition. With the pressure to stand out from the crowd, Bell began thinking outside the bun and settled on Mexican cuisine. He was a big fan of Mexican takeout himself and thought that Mexican food lovers needed a fast food option because it was often difficult to get a good taco on the go. As a result, Bell began plotting. His taco experimentation strategy was to find a location in a Mexican neighborhood. If tacos were successful, potential customers would attribute it to the location and conclude that the concept would not sell elsewhere. Bell started with what he knew: hot dogs. After securing his new location, there were regular hot dogs and chili dogs on the menu, and the chili dogs came with a secret sauce that would later become the foundation for the taco sauce we know today. While those were selling, Bell was researching tacos and devising quick production methods. Many Mexican restaurants stuffed the shells before frying them, which contributed to the lengthy process. 4 years later, he opened Bell's Hamburgers and Hot Dogs in a Latino neighborhood of San Bernardino. After noticing that a Mexican restaurant across the street, Mitla Cafe, drew long lines for its hard-shelled tacos, Bell dined there frequently for the next 2 years, attempting to reverse engineer the hard-shell taco recipe. He eventually became close enough to the owners that they showed him how they were made. By early 1952, he had opened his own taco stand, which he named Tacotilla. Bell decided to fry the shells first and then stuff them, allowing them to have fried shells ready to go before the customers arrived. It took some time to iron out all the kinks, but Bell eventually found a deep fryer that met his requirements. Bell's first customer was dressed in a suit, and as he bit into the taco, juice dripped down his sleeve and onto his tie. "We've lost this one," Bell thought, but he returned and said, "That was good, I'll take another one." The economy was booming. Bell eventually opened another stand in Barstow that sold tacos and shakes, and a few years later, he opened 3 taco stands called Tacotillas. It obviously did not end there. Bell grew increasingly ambitious. During a time when hamburger stands were on the rise, Bell challenged the status quo by bringing tacos to the masses. While Tacotilla was a success, Bell decided to relocate to Los Angeles a few years later after marrying and starting a family. He sold his shares in Tacotilla to his business partner and set out with a group of celebrity partners to open El Taco. The new company had 4 locations and was a big hit in Southern California. However, Bell was itching for another challenge, so he decided to sell the locations to a business partner and start over. Even when the 3 stores began to earn $50,000 per year, he was eager to sell them in order to expand into Los Angeles. The move was risky. Bell purchased 2 lots to build restaurants on, but as a result, he became cash-strapped. To solve the problem, he teamed up with a few LA Rams football players who trained near a Tacotilla and enjoyed the food. They were able to build several stores and turn a profit in their first year, which is quite an accomplishment for a single restaurant, let alone a few in their first year. El Tacos was the name of the restaurant. However, Bell desired to own his own business, so he built essentially the same restaurant but rebranded it as Taco Bell in Downey in 1962. He then went on to open 8 more small Taco Bells in Long Beach. During the early days of Taco Bell, Glen embodied the work hard, play hard mentality. What's his ideal type of party? Of course, there'll be a grand opening. His parties were so lavish that they were likened to the World's Fair. Glen would go to great lengths to ensure that the party was one to remember, including spotlights, bands, dancers, free hats, you name it. He was frequently seen scaling the roofs of his buildings to ensure that the balloons were in the proper position. While many of Bell's previous ventures included a few more locations, the overall goal of Taco Bell was to create a nationwide fast food restaurant. Bell's vision of creating a thriving chain began to take shape just 6 months later, with the opening of his second location in Long Beach, which is still in operation today. He then began franchising his restaurant. With the first Taco Bell franchise purchased in 1964, this first franchise, run by an old LA cop, did extremely well, with the owner reportedly bringing in around $10,000 per month, or around $74,000 today, almost immediately. 2 years later, in January 1967, there were 100 Taco Bell locations scattered throughout the Los Angeles area. Bell sold Taco Bell to PepsiCo for $130 million in 1978, and the chain grew by the thousands from there. Glen had a dream before tacos even crossed his mind: mini golf. When scouting out the first Bell's Hamburgers location, his mind was flooded with visions of families gathered around tiny bridges and buildings while putting colorful golf balls around. If there was one thing that Glen was certain of, it was that once he set his sights on a dream, he went for it. Years after imagining a magical place for families to gather, he restored and reopened the West Side and Cherry Valley Railway in Northern California as a museum featuring vintage trains and cars. When it came to providing fast, tasty food to his fellow California residents, Glen had no shortage of ideas. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, the man who would eventually found Taco Bell worked his way up from hot dogs and hamburgers to the crunchy tacos that would eventually become his passion. Taco Bell has continued to find unique ways to brand and partner in order to draw in customers. The company began implementing new menu ideas and restaurant concepts in the 1980s and 1990s, as well as expanding marketing and branding efforts. During this time, the company made several significant moves, including promotions tied to Tim Burton's film Batman, the introduction of a value menu in 1990, the introduction of Taco Bell Express, a small-scale Taco Bell with mostly quick, cheap options, as well as the sponsorship of the first ESPN X Games in 1995. The original Taco Bell closed around 30 years ago, but subsequent tenants never did much to update Glen Bell's original design. So if you drive by 7112 Firestone Boulevard in Downey, you can still see the beginnings of what would become Taco Bell's iconic design. However, the structure has been vacant for a long time and is a prime target for developers, who would most likely erase it and Glen Bell's piece of history with it. Taco Bell now has over 7,000 locations, employs over 220,000 people, and serves billions of people worldwide, all thanks to Glen's vision. It's no surprise that people wanted to own a Taco Bell after such a rousing success. They opened their 100th restaurant in Anaheim just 3 years later in 1967. Only 3 years later, in 1970, the company went public with 325 restaurants. In just over a decade, what began as a small hot dog stand grew into a massive Mexican food corporation. While Glen did not invent the taco, he did play a significant role in bringing the delicious, crunchy, cheese-filled taco that you know and love to the masses. And with that being said, it's time to end our video. Subscribe to this channel for more amazing videos like this. We'll see you with another interesting story.